The air in the high desert held the last bite of winter, but the sun on the red rocks of the canyon was warm. For Kellen, a cowboy driving a small, weary herd of longhorns north to the railhead, it was a welcome rest stop. For Liwan, a young Apache woman of the Bitter Water Band, it was an interruption. She'd been gathering medicinal sage on the sheltered southern slope when the distant bawling of cattle and the sharp calls of men had scattered the quiet. Now she watched from a hidden ledge as the two cowboys below tried to coax their skittish lead bull back from a treacherous scree slope. Kellen, the younger of the two, moved with a patient grace she grudgingly admired, unlike his older, louder companion who waved his arms and shouted. Kellen spoke in low tones to the animals, his movements calm and deliberate. After an hour, the cattle were settled near the creek, and the older man, Red, declared he was riding to the nearest settlement for a proper drink and a glimpse of a smile. Left alone, Kellen tended to the horses, then built a small, efficient fire. It was then Liwan decided to make her presence known. She didn't fear him. Her brother and cousins were hunting nearby, and she could disappear into the stone landscape like a shadow. But curiosity, that most human of traits, compelled her. She descended the slope silently, but deliberately scuffed a stone as she entered the circle of firelight. Kellen's hand went to his rifle and stilled as he saw her. He didn't reach for it. He simply looked, taking in her duskin dress, the knife at her belt, her proud, unyielding posture. "I mean no trouble," he said slowly, raising his empty hands. "Just passing through, watering the herd." "I see this," Liwan replied in clear, if heavily accented, English. She nodded toward the scatter of sage she dropped when the cattle came. "You scare my gathering." "I apologize for that," Kellen said, and he sounded like he meant it. He gestured to the coffee pot on the fire. "I can't replace your sage, but I can offer bitter water of my own as a peace offering." It was this odd courtesy that kept her there. She accepted the tin cup he offered, sitting on a rock opposite him. They talked in fits and starts. He was from Texas, driving these last few head to settle a debt. She was the daughter of a skilled hunter, learning the ways of plants from her grandmother. An hour passed in surprisingly easy conversation, a fragile bridge across a vast cultural canyon. Then Liwan's hand went to her throat, a sudden, frantic gesture. Her face, usually so composed, tightened with dismay. She stood, her eyes scanning the ground around her seat. "What is it?" Kellen asked, rising as well. "A ring, a silver ring with a turquoise stone. It was on a thong around my neck. The thong must have broken." She knelt, sifting through the coarse gravel and dust. "It was my grandmother's, from the Navajo. A gift for healing. It cannot be lost." Kellen immediately began to look, his eyes scanning the earth. But the area was a chaos of footprints, cattle, horses, their own, and the ring was small. After a thorough search of the immediate area yielded nothing, Liwan's shoulders slumped. The loss was a physical pain on her face. Kellen felt a pang of sympathy. "It might have fallen when you were up on the slope," he suggested gently, "before you came down." She followed his gaze up to the rocky ledge. The canyon wall was steep, a jumble of boulders, scrub brush, and loose shale. Finding a single silver ring in that vastness would be like finding one particular grain of sand. The impossibility of it settled over her, hardening into a defensive, prideful resignation. She couldn't show this white stranger the depth of her grief. She forced a scoff, masking her sorrow with a bold, challenging look. "You are a cowboy. You find cows in canyons. Can you find a ring in a mountain?" Kellen met her gaze, a flicker of a smile on his lips. "It'd be a mighty difficult task." "Then let us make it interesting," Liwan said, the words leaving her mouth before her better judgment could stop them. It was a joke, a deflection, a way to cloak her heartache in bravado. She tilted her chin up, her dark eyes sparkling with feigned mischief. "You white men like to gamble, yes? I will gamble. If you, Kellen from Texas, can find my grandmother's ring and all this stone before the sun touches that ridge tomorrow, I will be yours." The words hung in the thin mountain air. They were outrageous, a playful hyperbole her people might use in storytelling. She expected him to laugh, to shake his head, to dismiss the impossible wager. It would let them both off the hook with a smile. But Kellen didn't laugh. He studied her face, seeing the challenge, the hidden grief beneath the bravado. He looked from her, to the formidable canyon wall, and back to her. A slow, determined light kindled in his own blue eyes. "A gamble, huh?" he said, his voice quiet. He took off his hat, ran a hand through his sun-bleached hair. "All right then, terms are set. I find that ring by sunset tomorrow, you're mine. I don't. I'll give you my best saddle horse to make up for the loss. Fair?" Lewin's breath caught. He'd accepted, not as a joke, but as a serious bargain. A flutter of panic, mixed with something else entirely, stirred in her chest. "Fair," she heard herself say, the word barely a whisper. She left him then, retreating to her family's camp higher in the canyon, her heart a drum in her ears. She told herself it was foolishness. He would look for an hour, see the hopelessness, and leave. She would never see him again. The joke would be over. But as she lay awake that night, she saw his face not laughing, but thoughtful, determined. She thought of his hands, gentle with the frightened bull, steady as he poured coffee, and for the first time the idea woven into her jest didn't feel entirely like a joke. It felt like a door cracking open to a world of terrifying, thrilling possibility. At first light, Kellen stood at the base of the slope, a cup of cold coffee in his hand, and contemplated the task. The canyon wall was a taunting giant. The sage grew in sparse, dusty clumps. The rocks ranged from massive, truck-sized boulders to fields of fist-sized shale that shifted with every step. The ring could be anywhere. It could have bounced, rolled, slid into a crack, been covered by dust. It was, by any sane measure, impossible. But Kellen wasn't entirely sane when it came to a challenge, and something about Lewin's eyes, the real sorrow beneath the bold gamble, had hooked him. He hadn't come west because things were easy. He started at the spot where she'd first appeared the day before, a faint scuff on a flat rock her only marker. His method was systematic, a mix of cowboy practicality and desperate hope. He divided the slope into rough sections, using prominent rocks as boundaries. He got down on his hands and knees, sifting through every pile of loose stone, peering into every shadowy crevice. The sun climbed, and the heat reflected off the pale rock, baking him. Dust coated his clothes, sweat stung his eyes. He ignored the thirst, the growing ache in his back. Red returned mid-morning, hungover and surly. "What in tarnation are you doing, boy?" "Digging for gold." "Lost something," Kellen grunted, not looking up from a crack he was probing with a stick. "Well, lose it faster. We gotta move these cows. Every day we sit, we lose money." "You go on," Kellen said, his voice leaving no room for argument. "Take the herd. I'll catch up. Or I won't." Red stared, spat, and called him 10 kinds of fool, but by noon, Red and the herd were a dust cloud on the northern horizon. Kellen was alone with the mountain and the promise. The solitude focused him. As he worked, his mind wasn't on the impossible odds, but on Lewin. The intelligence in her gaze, the proud set of her shoulders, the way her laugh had felt like a rare gift when it finally broke through during their talk. The wager had been a joke, but his drive to fulfill it was dead serious. It wasn't about claiming her. The very thought sent a jolt of nervous heat through him. It was about proving something, proving he saw her loss as real, proving her grandmother's memory mattered, proving that not every white man in this land was just passing through, taking what he wanted and leaving dust behind. Meanwhile, in the Apache camp, Lewin went through the motions of her day. She helped grind corn, prepared rabbit meat for drying, but her attention was fractured, pulled constantly toward the canyon wall below. She saw the tiny, persistent figure of Kellen moving like an ant across the vast face. Disbelief turned to a gnawing anxiety. Why was he still there? Why was he trying so hard? The casual jest was becoming a tangible thread, pulling taut between them. Her brother Chow noticed her distraction. "You watch the white man dig in the dirt like a badger." "Why, he looks for something he lost," she evaded. Cheto's eyes narrowed. "He is a fool. Or he looks for something that is not his to find." Liwan said nothing. As the sun began its long descent, painting the rocks in fiery oranges and reds, a strange tension tightened in her chest. The impossible was being pursued with a steadfastness that shook her. She found herself making silent pleas to the spirits of the canyon. Not for him to fail, but for him to succeed, and then immediately fearing what that success would mean. Kellen's world had shrunk to a square yard of sharp rock. The sun was a bleeding wound on the horizon, minutes from touching the jagged ridgeline. He was exhausted, every muscle protesting, his fingers raw and bleeding from 1,000 tiny cuts. He had covered the entire slope, from where she'd appeared to the base of the fire. Nothing. Hope, that stubborn candle, was guttering out. He sat back on his heels, wiping grit from his eyes with a filthy forearm. He'd failed. The thought was a stone in his gut. He'd have to ride to their camp, offer his best horse, and see the resigned acceptance in her eyes. He'd see the joke end, not with laughter but with a quiet, mutual understanding of a promise unmet. He was about to stand when a last, desperate thought struck him. He'd searched where the ring could have fallen. But what if it had fallen as she descended? He'd been so focused on her sitting area and the slope below her ledge, he hadn't considered the path of her descent itself, a narrow, almost invisible game trail that wound between two large boulders. With the last of his energy, he hauled himself up to the mouth of that trail. The light was failing fast, the world turning to blue and purple shadow. He got down on his belly, peering into the deep, narrow gap where the boulders met. It was filled with wind-blown dust and dry leaves. Heart hammering with a final, futile hope, he reached his arm in, up to his shoulder, sweeping his hand through the debris. His fingers touched something smooth and cool, unlike stone or wood. He closed his hand around it, his breath freezing in his lungs. He pulled his arm out, and there, lying in his dusty, bleeding palm, was a ring. A simple band of silver holding a single sky-blue turquoise stone. For a moment he just stared, disbelief holding him still. Then a wild, triumphant laugh burst from him, echoing faintly in the silent canyon. He had done it. Against all reason, against all odds, he had found the impossible. He didn't run. Every step was careful, precious, the ring clenched tightly in his fist. He reached the Apache camp as the last sliver of sun vanished. People stopped their evening tasks to watch the dust-covered, weary white men walk purposefully into their midst. Liwan stood by her family's wickiup, having just given up her vigil. When she saw him, her body went rigid. He looked exhausted, near dead on his feet. But his eyes found hers across the clearing, and held them with an intensity that stole her breath. He walked straight to her, ignoring the wary, watchful eyes of her family. He didn't say a word. He simply opened his hand. There, in his palm, lay her grandmother's ring. Liwan's hand flew to her mouth. Her eyes widened, not with joy at first, but with pure, unadulterated shock. The world seemed to tilt. The joke, the impossible change, the thread of a whim it had solidified into a shining, silver reality in the hand of this stubborn cowboy. The air left her lungs in a soft gasp. She looked from the ring to his earnest, dirt-streaked face, seeing the immense effort, the unwavering dedication written in every line of him. The silence in the camp was absolute. All eyes were on them. Slowly trembling, she reached out and took the ring. The cool metal was a shock against her skin. She looked back up at him, the playful mask gone, replaced by awe and a dawning, profound understanding. He had not just found a piece of jewelry. He had honored her loss, her heritage, her words. Kellen, his voice hoarse from dust and emotion, finally spoke, softly only for her. "The sun is down," he said. "I believe I won the gamble." Liwan continued to stare at him, the shock melting into something warmer, deeper, and utterly terrifying in its certainty. The man had moved a mountain, grain by grain, for her. In her culture, such determination was a power greater than any boast. A slow smile, born of genuine wonder, began to touch her lips. She slid the ring onto her finger, the turquoise glowing in the twilight. "You did," she whispered, her voice filled with a new respect. Then, louder, for her family to hear, she added, "The terms were set. And they are met." She stepped closer to him, the space between them humming with the weight of the fulfilled promise. The joke was over. The real story, complex and uncharted, was just beginning. And in Kellen's weary, triumphant eyes she saw not a victor claiming a prize, but a man offering his whole heart, and waiting, breath held, to see if she would accept.